Hello fellow crafty souls. Today's cards are featuring the Secret Garden stencils. This is a beautiful stencil set from Altenew, and it's a 7 layering stencils. I'm also using some Hero Arts black watercolor paper, some cheapy metallic watercolor paints, and some Royal and Langnickel paintbrushes. Today's process, I wanted to really have a look at actually doing some watercolouring through the stencils. So you can see here, Altenew features some great layering guides inside their stencil packs. And once I finish doing all my painting, I'm actually going to outline the flowers in the Artline Black. It's like a fine tip pen. So the process of actually watercolor painting through your stencils is not a very difficult one. It's a bit of an alternative use for the stencils rather than just a standard ink blending and maybe doing a little bit of depth, creating some depth with your brushes and different color inks. So what I've found, a technique that actually really works here, is to make sure that the paint itself is not too wet and it is a little bit thicker, so that when you're actually painting through the stencil itself, the paint is not going to bleed through under the stencil itself. So the watercolor paper I'm using is from Hero Arts, and it's a beautiful black, and I thought for something a little bit different, I'd like to use like a metallic paint to paint through to sit against that black watercolor paper. It is a little bit of a thicker paper, so it can handle quite a lot of liquid, and for this particular technique I actually did not want to use too much water to actually thin down the paint. So the process for doing this is actually really self-explanatory, so it gives me a bit of an opportunity to sit and have a bit of a chat, catch up on a bit of the goss, if you like, or not that there's any goss. But with this card, this stencil, I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I found this style for the watercoloring through the stencil actually lends itself to a more impressionist appearance, and like, I don't know about anybody else, but one of my favorite impressionist artists is actually Monet. So I felt this kind of feels very much like one of his garden or lily pad paintings that you'll see hanging up. But yeah, I just really like this loose style, and throughout the painting process it does sometimes look like a bit of a hot mess, but it's definitely one that it's very soft and a little bit out of control, which this is another step in my relinquishing the need for perfectionism. So you could see there when lifting off the stencil that it has that really loose appearance. Now I actually lost some footage here. Oh, hello. Apologies for that loud noise. Someone riding past on a motorbike. But yeah, so I did lose some of the footage actually colouring the flowers. So these particular paints are just a really inexpensive, or as I said, cheapy set. I actually bought from, I think it was Spotlight, which is a craft store here in Australia. Just to use something a little bit different. But if you've got like the, I can't even think of it at the moment, any sort of metallic paint, it looks fantastic against a black cardstock. And I feel this is a technique that gets overlooked a lot because people tend to focus on the ink blending side of stenciling. But I do really appreciate this soft, very washy appearance. There was a little peace sign in there. That was my son Miles coming through to say peace to everyone on the channel. So when I started doing this particular floral stencil, the idea I had was to make a special card, and this was actually going to be a thank you card for International Nurses Day, because the Sunday the 12th of May is International Nurses Day, and it is also Mother's Day here in Australia. So the thought process was, oh, I'll have to make 2 different videos to honour both occasions. And then I watched one of Jennifer Maguire's videos last week, and in that she used a large floral stamp and actually cut it in half and got a 2 for deal. So 2 cards for the 1 stamped floral. So I thought, okay, let's do that instead. So hence I was able to actually luck out and get a thank you card in honour of International Nurses Day tomorrow. Well, it will be on the Sunday the 12th of May, and a Mother's Day card for our beautiful Aussie mums. I don't know if there's anywhere else in the world that celebrates Mother's Day on the 12th of May, but yeah. So it's been, as my subscribers may know, I am a registered nurse, and I am very honoured and privileged to work in this position, and this was to honour my other fellow nurses that I work with, and also nurses around the world that I don't have the privilege of working with, just as recognition for the amazing job that we do, and just as a bit of a thank you, because sometimes I feel like we just don't say thank you to each other enough, and it really is nice just to send some honour and love out there rather than just ignoring, or just working through without acknowledging the mighty work that we do. Anyway, see, because this painting is so self-explanatory, you're stuck having a bit of a chat with me, and it will be a all over the shop chat. I will try and stay on topic as much as possible, but yeah, so today's cards are really acknowledging the hardworking nurses and the hardworking beautiful mums out there, just as a thank you and acknowledgement that you are appreciated. So just back to the card for a moment, looking at the different layers, the stencils for the Secret Garden stencil set actually has separated sections, and you follow along with the layering guide, and it's pretty easy to kind of adjust the stencils to ensure that you're covering all the bases. So while I was actually painting this, I had the inner leaflet that had the layering and colouring guide, and I kept that as a reference. Now, to be honest, doing this card, the process, the drying times in between each layer of the stencils, because obviously you want each layer of the stencil to be dry before you go trying to paint the next layer in. This process took about 2 hours. It was definitely a labour of love, but I just sat and watched a movie and did the painting and really found it a beautiful release and a bit of relaxation. So this is a great opportunity to just kind of chill out and time out, which was nice. So the other thing I liked to do with this is it's building the different layers of colours, one on top of the other, and the paints were semi-transparent, so it took the thicker the paint was, the less wet the actual paint pan was, the thicker the colour actually came out. So for some colours I wanted the depth to be a little bit stronger, so I had the paint not as wet, if you like, and the brush definitely not as wet. So yes, it's been an interesting week of celebrations here at our particular hospital that I work at here in Cairns. We had a breakfast the other morning supplied for us, which was lovely, and we also did a special morning afternoon tea earlier in the week to celebrate with some of the staff that won't actually be working on the actual Mother's Day, International Nurses Day. So just working through and doing some more colouring. So this beautiful set too, I actually received as part of a secret retreat workshop that I did with Altenew last year, and I actually loved the workshops. If you have an opportunity to do a workshop with Altenew or with any one of the other wonderful stamp companies, I know Concord and Ninth does some great, the annual camp, I think, workshop that they do over a couple of days, and who else? I know Simon Says Stamp does some, and yeah, so have a look at your favourite stamp company that you like to use, or crafty company, and see who does offer these special retreats. I know Spellbinders also does one as well, and they have great like workshop exclusives, design products and things that offered just specifically for that retreat workshop. Okay, so this is a very quick fast forward. I've now dried my whole panel, and I'm going through with the fine liner pen and just tracing through all of the openings on each of the separate stencils. I'm not being careful with the tracing as I'm going through. Some of it will scribble out into the main part of the stencil opening, and again it matches that impressionist style rather than the neat precision, and neat and precision was definitely not what I was going for. So yes, this is another one of my goals of embracing imperfection and letting go and just having a little bit of fun with a bit of a different technique. So this was definitely one that I enjoyed doing. With the fine tipped pen, if the panel is not absolutely bone dry, which mine wasn't completely bone dry, the fine tip liner will actually sink into the metallic paint a little, so just make sure that you scribble the tip off on a piece of scratch cardstock just to get the paint off the tip, so you can continue tracing and maintain that fine line. This was definitely a fun process. So I'm actually working on, I've got my Tim Holtz glass mat, and then the sticky mat underneath the watercolor paper is the Altenew. I've got the sticky mat out of my Altenew Stampwheel, but you can actually buy the sticky mat separate, and I know that Altenew now does have that bigger sticky mat as well, the 9x12 I think it is. So yeah, that's the stencil now all outlined, and you can see it's definitely a real loose appearance. So I'm going to now cut out the stencil using the matching die, and I'm using my Gina K Intricut, and as you can see, my awkward showing of my setting that I've got it on the die cut setting, and being a bit thicker, this took me about not gonna lie, about 3 or 4 passes to go through, and each time I went through I had to tighten a little bit more and a little bit more to get all the way through. So I just, but I'm not going to show you the 15 times I had to run it through, well, 4 times. So that's it all cut out, and now I'm looking how to actually put that over 2, and then I was like, oh, do I just want to do it onto 1? And so I decided to do it across the 2 panels, because I did not feel up for filming and editing a second video, so the idea of a twofer really worked for me. So I'm using the Streamlined cling stamp, and I love this as a background, and I'm going to use my Versafine Onyx Black ink. And what I'm actually going to do, I don't own a decent grey stamping ink, so I'm going to cover my stamp. What I'm then going to do is stamp it onto just a scratch piece of cardstock and take that out, and then I'm going to pop in my background cardstock and do second generation stamping. Oh geez, it's enough to make you seasick with a bit of a wiggle going on there, and you can see the design is there, nice and neat, but it's a little bit softer. So if you want a bit of a softer background, or you don't quite have the grey that you're looking for, sometimes using a black and then doing it as second generation. Now I got that design and I've popped it back in and layered it up a little bit, and that'll make for an interesting background at another time. So just doing this second generation on the second panel. So I'm cutting the 2 panels out using one of my A2 layered rectangles from Waffle Flower, sticking the 2 panels together so that I can lay out the floral set, and then I'm using my Sweet Petunia glue gun, if you like. I don't know, it just makes it a lot easier. And I'm going to stick the floral across the 2 panels, and the stencil was, I didn't quite go all the way to the top, so I'm just utilizing the natural ending of that. And now, rather than using a set of scissors, I'm just going to use my craft knife to cut through, and I'll just pass that through a few times to break through the watercolor paper, and then that'll get me a nice neat finish between the 2 panels, because I'm definitely not awkward when it comes to using the craft knives. So just a little bit left over, and there's my 2 for deal. So I was picking out some sentiments, and I chose the thanks and the you are so special sentiments, and I'm going to stamp those out just using again my Onyx Black ink. And with the Onyx Black ink, because it is a pigment ink, it will sit a little bit longer, and I am a great one for actually smearing my wet ink. So to avoid that, I like to just coat it with a bit of clear embossing powder and then heat set it. So yeah, stamp that a couple of times to make sure it comes up looking nice and crisp, and I'll do it. Some people will stamp it twice to make it nice. I tend to do it thrice. So this is just some Ranger clear embossing powder going through, and I'm going to cover those 2 sentiments, and then I will use the matching die to cut them out. So I love using my embossing powders, and some people go, it doesn't make a difference about heating it from underneath. I like to do it a little bit from underneath first. I don't know, I find I get quite a good finish, and for me it feels like it comes up a bit smoother, but for other, that's just my anecdotal evidence. Now I'm not going to lie, when I was picking out these sentiment dies, It took me a good hot minute and a half to try and figure out which one was the matching one for the You Are So Special. So I was sitting there and trying to figure it all out. I eventually got there. But yeah, I was feeling a bit special while I was trying to actually pick it out. So again, I love my Gina Intricut. It is fantastic. It is so easy to use. I'm using it when I'm doing my hot foiling, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun. So here I was trying to figure out my placement for my sentiments, and I decided to cut out some more of the sentiments, but without all the stamping on it, just so I could back it up and behind each sentiment and make it that little bit thicker, added a little bit of dimension. That's the word I was looking for, the dimension. So what I'm using here is just my little mini blossom die machine from Altenew. So I'll go through, and there's 3 layers of sentiment there. So 2 scrap and then the topmost sentiment. So, and that just gives it a nice bit of dimension. So with the thanks card, I thought that I would actually place the sentiment in the middle of the flower because there was no spaces on the sides. And then I'll just bust out my T-ruler just to make sure that my sentiment is straight and give it a press down. Now for the other sentiment, I layered it up again as well and popped that off to the side a little. And I really like how those backgrounds came out with that streamlined stamp in the background. And then I will glue my panels to an A2 card. I've got a stack that I've made. And when I've lost my crafty mojo, I tend to just kind of make a few while I'm going. And this is my 2 for card. My 2 for the price of 1. So, you know, this is a great way to use your big florals and stretch them across a couple of panels. So I appreciate you joining me. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.